Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had a great, a healthy mental health break. Um, that's all we can hope for. I didn't do the sit-ups. I did some squats. I didn't want to get changed. You can still do squats in your jeans. People don't even. It's good. I feel good. I feel better. I feel inspired. We've had such great speakers, inspiring us to kind of take control of our life and make positive changes, do intentionally good things for ourselves. So it's been a great morning so far. We have two more speakers, and then I hope you feel empowered to do wonderful things with the rest of your day. So let me bring this first speaker up. The first speaker of the next two of the I want to say afternoon. It's not quite afternoon. The late morning speaker is somebody who has 35 years of experience in a field that we spoke earlier about fields that are not fully appreciated. I was talking about HR, but first responders definitely don't get their due. And this year I've had experiences with first responders twice. And if there's a community that deserves our respect and even admiration, I would say it is first responders. So Sandra has over 35 years of experience in that world. She is now a communications officer at the city of Oshawa, has extensive knowledge and training in critical incident stress. And I'm going to turn things over to you, Sandra Mackey, everyone.
Hi, thanks very much, Ali.
Sure.
Hello, everybody. First off, I am so pleased to be able to take part in this. Amy Spring's done an amazing job, as well as Ali and everybody else that's put this together. So, to have a virtual mental health conference like this with some incredible speakers just giving information is so needed and very appreciated by, I'm sure, all those in the community and first responders as well. I'm just going to share my screen here. And give me a second here. Okay, so when I look at critical incident stress management, that's what I'm going to talk about just for the next 20 minutes or so. It's the knowledge of that it's okay not to be okay, and I'm part of what's known as the Durham Region Critical Incident Stress Support Team, and I've been in emergency services, as Ali mentioned, for over 35 years in policing and also within the fire services. So I do wear many different hats professionally. My background in policing and in fire, but then also as an approved instructor in critical incident stress management and peer support, and the chair of the regional Durham Region Critical Incident Stress Support Team that whose mandate is to support all emergency services, police, fire, ambulance, and others in first response in dealing with some of the trauma and the exposures that they see. But more importantly, also wear many other hats. I'm a mom of a 25-year-old son that I absolutely adore. I'm a friend of other folks related to me through emergency services and just throughout my childhood. I'm a sister of an older, I'm the younger sister of the two of us, who I absolutely respect. And I'm also a wife of almost 30 years now. And then I'm a daughter as well of my mom, who's now pushing 90 years old. And quite honestly, these roles bring many other challenges that are unique. But I think that's why I am truly so passionate about mental health because of the roles that I've played in my life and how that has impacted me. Suicide has been in my family background. My father committed suicide when I was 6 years old, leaving 4 kids and my mom to pick up the pieces and carry on. And so there is definitely, an impact that goes along with that. And of course, 50 years ago, the knowledge of mental health and what treatments and what was available back then definitely isn't what it is today. And so unfortunately, suicide was the answer for him. But the ripple effect that it had on everybody else was definitely there. As well, there's been addiction within my family, and my stepfather, who became my next father, 5 years later, and over the next 20, 30 years of his life, I absolutely adored him. He was an incredible man, and I loved him like crazy. But he did suffer from an addiction of alcohol, and it also, had a toll on him and our family, um, and is something that we had to deal with. My sister, who you saw a picture of earlier, she is an absolutely amazing lady, but she has suffered from severe depression pretty much her entire life. Postpartum depression after having two kids, as well as probably some of the mental health issues that my father, my biological father, suffered from. And so she deals with that um, daily, and has, gotten professional help, but still struggles throughout her life with that. And the way I look at it is, it's like a deck of cards. Those genetic traits that unfortunately my dad had, those could have been passed on to me. I could have ended up being the one with the severe depression instead of my sister. So it can hit and touch any one of us. And I think most people within their lives do have someone, either personally themselves, other people, friends, family, that have, different types of mental illnesses that they deal with. The age-related mental health issues that my mom faces now at 90 years old. She's an ex-psychologist, so her mental health is extremely important to her. And so as she ages, the age-related mental health issues that seem to crop up, like dementia and some of those other things that are occurring as you get older, are things that she's starting to struggle with, that I'm also having to deal with as her daughter. And then, of course, there's me. My 35 years in a career of being exposed to critical incidents, and in dealing and helping others who have been exposed to trauma throughout their careers in police, fire, and ambulance. So, the importance of recognizing mental health as something that we need to embrace, accept, and find and work towards finding solutions for everyone is so very, very important. So to me, critical incident stress is one of the areas that I can help, and that my knowledge and skills in that over so many years of training, I use that information to bring awareness to, and help others that may be dealing with it. And Andrea spoke about, trauma is revealed through triggers and through awareness, and that's so extremely true. So what is a critical incident? It's a usually challenging event or experience that has that potential to create human distress, which can overwhelm one's usual coping mechanisms. But the reality is, it's the normal reaction by a normal person to an abnormal event, incident, or experience. There's what they call in the first responder world as a top 10 of what they deem critical incidents. I'm going to touch on just a couple of them. One is suicide. Another one is serious injury or death of children. And that's because, we look at children as being those who should never be impacted by pain or suffering. So when a child is hurt or injured, it resonates with us because of the purity and the innocence of children, and how we as nurturers just want to protect them. Mass casualty incidents and natural disasters. And then the fourth, which tends to be one of the ones that stands out the most, is those should never have happened kind of calls. And those are ones, especially in the first responder world, where it can happen to even you. If there's a reason why something happened, we seem to be able to handle that better. But when it should never have happened, those are the calls that kind of hit us a little bit stronger. Reality, though, is it's not really even the event itself that makes it critical. It's how you're responding to it based upon your own personal experiences and your triggers. Again, I go back to what Andrea said, and when I listened to her talking, it was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we talk about. Your own personal triggers that make or define it as a critical incident to you. It makes it traumatic to you. That critical incident or experience then has that ability to impact each person differently, and at different stages in their lives. When I first started in the first responder world, I was in my 20s, and we get accidents all the time. And so I would hear about an accident involving a motorcycle, and I hate to say it, but sometimes that is a little bit more, visually hard, and the impact is usually very tragic. And I would think, oh, that's too bad. But then I would be able to let it go. When my son decided he wanted to be driving around on a motorcycle and didn't like wearing the gear, every time after that, I would hear about a motorcycle fatality, and my level of stress would go up because now I had a personal trigger or something that I could relate to, and it would immediately draw me to my son and thinking about him and his own safety. So what happens? Well, it can challenge your worldview. When your basic needs for yourself and for others are disrupted, what can happen is it can impact your ability to feel safe, to trust other people, to feel in control, and it can even hit you at your own personal positive esteem level, and your sense and ability to accept yourself and others can occur. In the emergency service world, we talk about how when a critical incident sticks, we use the word bite when it bites us. What causes it to bite is a personal identification to it. Right now, I can identify with the motorcycle accident because my son has a motorcycle. Calls of my mom or calls of elderly people wandering off from retirement home in the winter, again, used to bother me, but now it's a heightened level because I have that personal identification of the fact that my mom's 90 and I think about her if she was in that situation. High emotional human suffering. Again, going back to those can't explain or shouldn't type of calls happening. Prolonged exposure. And I mean, right now we're all dealing with COVID. That is something that for many of us is a critical incident. It's a prolonged exposure to an abnormal event. Right? And cumulative. In the first responder world in particular, we experience cumulative incidents of being exposed to either trauma that we've been exposed to or trauma that others, just by the nature of what we have experienced with them. And then there's things like unique triggers, something that stands out that you can really identify with. It could be simply going and being present when someone has a cardiac arrest and that person on the ground experiencing that is the same age as your own grandfather, or a child who maybe has been hit by a car on a bicycle and that child wears the same clothes or has the same sort of bicycle as your own child. It's a unique trigger that you can bond with. Now, this isn't, there's many more different things that can make it bite for you individually, and it will vary from person to person. But there's different things that can happen. And those are the reactions and the responses that occur if you've been exposed to a critical incident. Some of them are cognitive, and they can go from as far as distortion. I don't know if any of you have ever been involved in a car accident, but it seems like everything slows down or speeds up very quickly. Difficulty concentrating, difficulty making decisions or problem solving. I've learned over my years of experience and working in a high volume, high critical type of environment where calls are happening all the time, that at the end of the day, if I've had something like a bad shooting incident or a stabbing or a suicide, and my adrenaline level is still high, by the time I get home, for about the first 4 or 5 hours, I don't want to make a decision. I don't want to make that decision on what are we going to eat tonight? What are we going to watch on TV? That's my personal way of how I react from a high level of stress. Some people can have flashbacks. They can have personal guilt, preoccupation with the event where you just can't let go of it. Even hypervigilance. I know of folks where, they hear about kids being, hit on a bicycle or pedestrian struck, and now they won't even let their kids, ride their bicycles out in front of the sidewalk of their own house because they've got a hypervigilance about it. And then diminished thinking and memory. That's something that's just a normal reaction and response. Emotionally, what folks can experience are anxiety, right? Fear, apprehension, irritability and anger, depression, intense grief or numbness, and even a detachment. I know that I think it was jack.org was talking about that whole piece of detachment and depression as well. And I know that a lot of university kids in particular have that feeling of either the depression or that detachment and numbness. Everything is going right in the world. They should be happy. They should be feeling joy, but they're just an overwhelmed numbness and detachment. And that's simply because um, their usual coping mechanisms aren't working and they're overstressed. And that's just one of the emotional reactions or responses to it. Mood swings, loss of emotional control, feeling overwhelmed, panic, and even inappropriate outbursts. You can hear about it when people go to funerals. Sometimes the things that come out of people's mouths, you wonder, what are they thinking? And the reality is it's just their reaction and response to the level of stress that they are experiencing right now that overwhelms their normal coping mechanisms and how they would normally respond. Right? Those are some of the emotional pieces. When we look at behavioral, impulsiveness is a big one, making those risk-taking decisions. Sleep disturbances is a huge one. There's so many, and of course, first responders' worlds are even heightened with that because of the strange shifts. But sometimes they use increased use of substances, sleeping pills or other substances just to help out. Withdrawal is another one. Intensified startle reflex, when you're jumpy. Of course, family discord, crying spells. And what I've noticed the most, especially with folks that are undergoing some of the reactions and responses to exposure to high levels of stress, is that lack of hygiene and missed workouts. When we talk about that positive self-esteem, and that's one to watch out for in people. If you know someone who normally works out a lot and they take care of themselves, and all of a sudden, they look like they're just jumped out of bed and they've got bedhead on a regular basis, and they're no longer taking care of themselves. That can be one of the behavioral signs and reactions. Physically, we've all experienced different types of physical stressors, but some of the ones that stand out are just having that overwhelming fast heartbeat or a slow one, digestive issues where you just don't feel like eating or you overconsume, hyperventilation is one, muscle spasms, the list goes on. Fatigue with weakness, even dizziness can take place. And then the spiritual level of those signs and reactions and responses to high levels of stress or even critical incident stress can be, if you are spiritual, anger at God, withdrawal from faith practice. But it also speaks beyond that. It speaks to just that inability to see positivity and joy and beauty in life. And then there's even the devaluing of self and others. What we found is that it's most people, first responders will see a heightened level of exposure to critical incidents, but the average person will experience, over 70% of average people will experience one or two critical incidents that are critical to you in your lifetime. So these are some of the reactions and responses that you need to be aware of, and recognize that these are normal responses. Interestingly enough, there is a science behind critical incident stress. And the amygdala and the hippocampus are in charge of and control a chemical response of over 260 chemicals that are released when a critical incident happens. Cortisol is released, and that level of adrenaline that goes from 0 to 100 when you're exposed to trauma or a critical incident. If there's no personal attachment, it will start to abate after about 5 hours. That's why I said after I come off a big incident, I know now what my personal reactions and responses are. And so I can accept them, I let them happen. And then about 5 hours or so later, I know that they've started to come back down and they start to return to normal. But when the incident is personal, right? When it's impacting and has a personal trigger to you, this chemical response that occurs in your brain, our perceptions and our brain, they don't settle down easily after that. And the chemicals can continue for about 2 weeks afterwards. Then if it still isn't dealt with, we're still not taking care of ourselves and seeking out supports, it actually starts to compound. And that 14 to 16 becomes 28 to 32, and then it becomes 56 to 64. And then you start seeing some really dangerous signs. So what I like to impart on folks, and when I do diffuses and debriefs for emergency personnel, but for anybody who has experienced something that just goes beyond your normal coping mechanisms, there's 6 things that are really important to do, especially after those immediate few hours afterwards. And one is to hydrate. Hydrate with water, not alcohol. And the reason for it is the body is already made up of over 60% water. All of our chemicals, all the reactions that take place in our bodies occur because we have water within it. So if you take the science behind it and you know that water helps to flush out those toxins, think of it as the cortisol that's just been released after a critical incident, and those 260 chemicals that are flushing through your body. Hydrating will help flush that water out. Eat healthy foods, right? Really consume the foods that are fibrous, right? Because fiber binds and will help, again, flush those toxins out. Think of Metamucil, right? You want to take that food and you want to flush it out through the body. You want to grab those chemicals and flush them out, instead of eating the fatty foods, which binds chemicals and binds those toxins in. And yet the body likely will want to crave. It'll crave the high carb foods and those foods that are fatty. So think about it after experiencing something. You want to get something healthy in your body that has fiber. Next important thing is you want to exercise. Doesn't mean go out and run a marathon, but we do know that exercise releases endorphins. Endorphins are good. Endorphins help combat, get rid of the cortisol in your body. So if you can do some type of exercise and do what you would normally do. If you walk the dog, go out and walk the dog, but walk him a little bit faster or take him a little bit longer, right? Because you want to encourage your body to release some of those endorphins. The other one you want to do is keep to a routine. It's really important after a critical incident, because your world's just been turned upside down, that you want to have a certain amount of control over the things that you're used to. So keeping to a routine helps to normalize your processes and helps you bring back that sense of control. You also want to understand that responses are a normal part of processing a critical incident. And that's, again, what we talk about when we do crisis intervention and we do peer support, is that we help normalize it for folks to realize that they're not losing their marbles, that they aren't experiencing anything else that's not just a normal reaction, a normal part of processing a critical incident. But when you're alone and you don't talk to other people and you don't know, then what you may think that you actually are going through something that no one else is experiencing. And that's why the last one is so incredibly important, especially for your own mental health. And that's just to talk about it. Talk about it to friends, talk about it to families, talk about it to your peers who may understand what you're going through. And most importantly, talk about it to professionals. As a peer supporter, I do not profess to be a mental health professional. I've been given tools, education, and support systems in place that I can give some ideas and I can offer a safe environment for people to be able to talk. But the professionals really do have those resources that can help you, obtain the level of support that you need, depending on what the critical incident is. So social connection and talking about it is really, really important after a critical incident. And it's important to do it sooner than later. And the reason for that is it's like a window. When you've experienced a critical incident, it pushes that window open. In other words, your emotions are just bare. A lot of people aren't comfortable with bare emotions, right? So as time goes by, we put up roadblocks and we put up things that close that window. And we even start closing it off from our family and friends and those people that we would normally run to or go to that we know can help us. So that's why it's really important to recognize when you may be dealing with something so that you can actually let people in when your window's open. One, because you can normalize it. Two, because you really want to understand it. And three, so you can cut yourself some slack, right? I used to think, oh my gosh, I have this high intense job and I'm making all these different calls and all these different decisions. And then I go home and I sit in front of the TV and I've got the remote control and I'm looking at it like it's a foreign object in my hand, wondering how do I get the satellite on from the other thing, right? Cut myself some slack. It'll come back. I know what it is. I know what I'm doing. It's just my body's way of processing what I've just gone under. So cut yourself some slack when you're having some of those reactions and responses to stress, because they're normal responses. And then take the necessary steps of self-care sooner rather than later. And if you're not able to return to your new normal, because a critical incident does change us a little bit, seek professional assistance, right? When you've been exposed to something that's out of the norm, and especially if you're in a first responder and you're exposed to many things over and over again, it's like walking through a puddle. right, of water. You can't expect to walk through that puddle and not just get a little bit of water, get a little bit wet from it. I'm going to leave you with a couple other things. Athletes hire personal trainers to help them become the best that they can, physically, because they know that their bodies need those extra tools and support in order for them to be able to do their personal best. Right? Again, the average person is going to experience one or two critical incidents, and the first responder is going to experience up to 44% more than the average person. So there is a good likelihood that you're going to be exposed to at least one critical incident or some type of event or experience during your lifetime that causes you to have some reactions and responses. So arm yourself with tools and support now. Taking part in this conference is exactly the type of thing you need to do. Look after your mental health just as you would your physical health. Seek out professionals who can help you maintain your best during whatever personal struggle you're facing. And the reality is it's good to do that now. Don't wait until you are experiencing a critical incident or an abnormal event that kind of throws your world upside down. Go out, find yourself support in advance. Find someone you can connect to that supports you. And even if you only connect with them once or twice a year, because then if something happens, you've already got that person in place, right? You've already got someone that you connect with, someone that understands you, and someone that can offer you that support. So you're not out there looking and struggling now with the stress and anxiety of trying to find someone. Why? Because you're worth it. And interestingly enough, did you know that the average human has over 60,000 thoughts a day? And of those 60,000, 50,000 of those are negative. One negative thought, 20 minutes later, we've created an entire story around that negative thing. And honestly, that's quite dangerous. And you don't want to go there. And stay away from what ifs. Try not to get caught up in the what if world, because 80% of worry is unfounded. Right? Focus on the positive. Try and move forwards, not backwards. Look for the beauty around you and be grateful. And try and consciously be in the moment. There's some amazing tools of resiliency and mental health that are going to help you be healthier, right? I'm not going to go into all of these because I'm sure some of you know many of them, but these are things that you can do, right? Use physical care, mental health strategies, relaxation, breathing techniques are incredibly important. Build your own personal plan for stress management. Take part in conferences on mental health. Get supports, right? Work to manage your stressors so that they don't manage you. That's basically it. Self-awareness. Understand what your triggers are and put those supports in place. And that's it from me from the critical incident stress world. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And thank you so much for letting me take part in this. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. We appreciate your time so much too. This was really like, it's one of those things that once it's presented to you, it feels like so much common sense. But if you don't think about it, you don't, it'll never be common sense, right? It's so many of the things you're saying. Of course, exercise and routine and diet should be, well, how we fuel ourselves will then outwardly help how we can help others and help ourselves. And we don't think about that often enough. You were talking about the importance of, the time frame after an incident. And it's interesting to apply the old, get back on the horse and ride theory. It's very important after a critical incident. I don't know if a lot of people think about that either, but you're clearly a wealth of information. So I'll just say it one more time. If people have questions or comments, please do help. I know that somebody said here that working with you for 30 years in policing was a pleasure. That's JC. I assume after 30 years, you know exactly who JC is. You were the one peer support I could always count on, which allowed me to rise above the trauma and take one step at a time to recover. That is from Janice.
Nice.
And there's a few comments about this being a wonderful presentation, which it definitely was. I wanted to ask you one final thing, unless some other comments come in, but if not, then this will just be a final question. For people who are not first responders, who are not intending to be first responders, but want some kind of foundation, maybe a little bit more than basic training in this area, because what you've been speaking about for the last 20 minutes or so has led me to believe that this is some training that we should all have. What are some resources or places we can go to look into that type of training?
Okay, well, thanks for asking that. My team, again, I'm with the Durham Region Critical Incident Stress Support Team, and I've taken training all over the place in regards to peer support. There is a course through the ICISF, which is the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, which I'm a part of as one of their improved instructors. And they present assisting individuals in crisis, which to me is an amazing course on peer support, but it's more than that because it is for everyone. It goes over active listening. It talks about a model to be able to walk someone through when they've experienced, a higher level of stress. My team, as one of the local peer supporters for our region, I myself do and available to do training for outside services as well and different organizations. I've trained our city folks here in Parks and Recs and different fire services and police services as well, and even the mental health shelters. But my team is called DRCISST.net for Durham Region Critical Incident Stress Team.net. Big mouthful. But if you go on that website and go into the training.
Can I ask you for that again, Sandra? And I'm going to put it in the chat here.
Sure. So it's DR, so Delta Romeo. I'm going to do the police phonetics on you. DRCISST.
SST.
As in Tom.
Okay.
So Durham Region Critical Incident Stress Support Team.
Yeah.
Or just reach out to me personally at smackey.
Was it .com? I sort of missed that.
No, .net.
.net. Okay, I'm going to put that out here. DRCISST.net.
That's it. Yeah. Or they can just reach out to me personally anytime.
Okay.
Just smackey@oshawa.ca, and I'd be happy to help you out with getting resources and proper training. Because honestly, this training is valuable to everyone because you can not just for critical incidents, but just in understanding your own stressors and recognizing them.
Yeah. If there's one thing that you made clear above all else is how important this training would be. I mean, no one is going to live their life without and avoid all of the things that you talked about, these potential incidents and all that. None of it is stuff that like, oh, it won't affect me. It is very, very clear that it is stuff that can very much affect us. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.